Dimitro and Hristina, a lifetime of love across the ocean. Dimitro was a young engineer living in Chicago who loved to spend his weekends exploring historic districts and photographing old architecture. One spring morning, he took a train up to Milwaukee to visit a historic square he had never seen before. While he was taking pictures of an old cathedral, a woman with long dark hair accidentally walked into his frame. She smiled apologetically, and that smile stayed with him the entire day. That woman was Hristina, a teacher of literature at a local high school. She had been showing her students the city's landmarks on a field trip. When she noticed Dimitro's camera and the way he admired the buildings, she struck up a short conversation. They found themselves walking together for a few blocks, talking about books, travel, and the hidden corners of American cities. Over the next few weeks, they kept in touch by messages and phone calls. Dimitro would send her photos of places he visited, and Hristina would recommend poems and stories connected to those places. Their conversations grew longer and more personal, about their families, hopes for the future, and the challenges of balancing work with personal dreams. By summer, Dimitro invited Hristina down to Chicago to see his favorite spots. They spent an entire weekend exploring old neighborhoods, eating at a small diner, and listening to street musicians by the lake. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple and warm, the kind of time that quietly binds two people together. When autumn came, Dimitro's job offered him a position in Boston. It was a chance for his career to grow, but meant moving away. They both worried about the distance, but instead of letting it end things, they decided to try. They scheduled weekend visits, video calls, and supported each other through exams, deadlines, and family matters. 2 years later, Dimitro managed to transfer back to the Midwest. On a winter evening in Milwaukee, the same square where they had first met, he proposed to Hristina with a simple silver ring. She said yes, laughing and crying at the same time. The couple spent the next few months planning a modest wedding that reflected who they were, intimate, full of family, and full of the places and music they loved. They held the ceremony in a small wooden church near Hristina's childhood town in Minnesota, decorated with wildflowers gathered by her students. Dimitro's father played guitar during the reception, and everyone danced until late in the night. Once married, they settled in a bright but simple apartment in Chicago. Hristina transferred to a school there, where she started a small literature club for teenagers. Dimitro began leading a team of young engineers and occasionally traveled across the U.S. for short projects. Even though their days were busy, they created rituals to stay connected. Sunday morning walks to the farmer's market, reading aloud from books before bed, and saving up each year for a trip to a new place inside the country. The first real challenge came when Dimitro's mother fell seriously ill back in Ukraine. Hristina spent evenings on calls with him, bringing homemade food after work and comforting words. This period tested their patience, but also deepened their trust. When Dimitro felt overwhelmed, Hristina reminded him that they were a team. When Hristina doubted herself at work, Dimitro supported her to finish her teaching degree. A few years later, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Sophia. Becoming parents changed their rhythm completely. Sleepless nights, small worries, and joyful milestones became part of their everyday life. Dimitro learned how to braid Sophia's hair before preschool, and Hristina wrote short bedtime stories just for her. Together, they created a home filled with warmth, books, and laughter. By their 10th anniversary, Dimitro and Hristina looked back at the path they had walked, from a random encounter in a cathedral square to a family built on shared values and perseverance. They weren't perfect. They argued, sometimes misunderstood each other, but they had learned to talk, to forgive, and to keep choosing one another every day. As Sophia grew, their life continued to evolve. Every summer, the three of them traveled to a rented wooden cabin in the Smoky Mountains. These trips became sacred family rituals, long hikes, collecting berries, evenings by the fire with Hristina reading aloud while Dimitro played the guitar. During one of these trips, they found a small old house for sale and began dreaming about renovating it as their own retreat. When Sophia became a teenager, new challenges arrived, balancing school, friends, and her own independence. Dimitro and Hristina had to adjust to a new phase of parenthood, listening more, advising less and trusting their daughter's choices. There were occasional clashes, but also quiet car rides and long walks where they shared hopes and fears as a family. At the same time, Hristina decided to start a community reading room in their neighborhood in Chicago. Dimitro helped her design the interior and build the shelves himself on weekends. Watching people come in to borrow books and attend workshops filled both of them with pride. Their marriage continued to evolve. They celebrated their 15th anniversary with a simple dinner at the same cafe where they had once sat during their first trip together. They spoke about the years behind them, sickness, health, small victories, and about what lay ahead. For the first time, they felt not only like a couple, but like partners in building something lasting beyond themselves. A family, a home, and a contribution to their community. Even in their 40s, they kept making space for small adventures. A weekend train to New Orleans to listen to jazz, a photography workshop for Dimitro, a new writing course for Hristina. They had learned that love wasn't a single big moment, but an ongoing series of choices to stay curious about each other, to support growth, and to keep creating new memories. On a crisp autumn morning, standing in front of their renovated mountain house in the Smokies, with Sophia snapping pictures of them, Dimitro squeezed Christina's hand. "We've come a long way," he said softly. She smiled. "And we're still on our way." By their 20th wedding anniversary, Sophia was studying at university in New York. The apartment that had once been noisy with laughter and school bags felt quiet, but not empty. Dimitro and Hristina learned how to enjoy their time as a couple again. Early morning walks through Chicago's old neighborhoods, cooking new recipes together, and visiting friends they hadn't seen in years. They also poured energy into the projects they had always dreamed of. The little house in the Smoky Mountains slowly turned into a small guest house with 2 rooms for hikers and artists. On weekends, Hristina ran poetry readings by the fireplace, and Dimitro offered photography walks for visitors. What had been a private retreat became a small community space where people came to rest, create, and connect. Life wasn't without challenges. Dimitro had a minor health scare one winter, and Christina's father passed away the following spring. They leaned on each other, took turns being strong, and learned to slow down. In those moments, they understood how deeply their bond had grown over the years. It wasn't just romance anymore, but a friendship built on countless shared days. By the time they reached their silver anniversary, they stood on the porch of their mountain house, watching the sun set over the ridges. "Remember the cathedral square?" Dimitro asked. Hristina smiled. "I do, and I'd still stop to talk to the man with the camera." Their story didn't end with a single moment, but stretched forward into many more. Welcoming grandchildren one day, hosting more travelers, writing more stories, taking more photographs. It became a living proof that love can start with a chance encounter, and through patience, respect, and everyday care, grow into a life rich with meaning, on either side of the ocean. As the years went by, the rhythm of their lives slowed, but it also became richer. Sophia graduated and began her career in New York, often calling her parents late at night to share both worries and victories. Though Dimitro and Hristina missed her presence at home, they felt proud watching her grow into the kind, independent woman they had always hoped she would become. Every few months, the family reunited at the little house in the Smoky Mountains. Those reunions became a new kind of tradition. Sophia would bring friends, sometimes a boyfriend, later her own husband. Around the fireplace, the family expanded. More laughter, more stories, more voices blending with Dimitro's guitar and Hhristina's readings. When Sophia had children of her own, Dimitro and Hristina stepped naturally into their roles as grandparents. They delighted in watching little hands stack books on the same shelves Dimitro had built decades earlier, and hearing small footsteps race across the wooden floors of the mountain house. Hristina began writing short stories for her grandchildren, illustrated by Dimitro's photographs, little keepsakes of their family's legacy. Even as the seasons of life brought gray hair and slower steps, they never stopped exploring. Their travels became gentler. Small towns, quiet museums, coastal walks. Each place they visited was another thread woven into the tapestry of their shared life. On their 50th anniversary, their family gathered in the very same Milwaukee Square where their story had begun. Sophia organized a surprise celebration. Photographs from every stage of their journey were hung around the square, like chapters of a book. Surrounded by children, grandchildren, friends, and neighbors, Dimitro and Hristina danced under the evening lights, laughing like the young couple they once were. When the music paused, Hristina whispered, "All these years, and it still feels like we're just beginning." Dimitro squeezed her hand. "That's because love doesn't end. It only keeps growing." As they grew older, Dimitro and Hristina spent most of their time in the mountain house. Chicago still called them back, but the quiet mornings in the Smokies became their sanctuary. They sat together on the porch, watching the mist roll through the valleys, and spoke about what they had built, not only for themselves, but for everyone who had crossed their path. Their little guest house became a place of stories. Poets leaving verses in notebooks, artists gifting sketches, travelers planting small trees around the garden. "We started this home for ourselves," Hristina often said, "but it became something for everyone." When they turned 70, Sophia gathered the whole family again. There were no grand speeches, just a fire, a guitar, and the sound of their grandchildren reading aloud. Under the stars, Dimitro and Hristina held hands, feeling that their journey, though long, was still unfolding.